Welcome back to another episode. Today's topic is school. School. School is one of those things our kids went to a few months back, right? Before the coronaverse hit. So if you're like me, you have kids, they're learning from home in a different type of environment than what school actually represented. But when they were in school, what actually was it? What did it actually represent? So if you were asking me about school, I see school as a place, a location, an environment that provides our kids or students with a formalized education. So when I say formalized, that means everything step by step by step. There's a process, there's a system that's actually in place. Our schools have standards that are given, let's say, by the federal government, the state government, whatever, they essentially get their authority and the rules they need to operate from. And school, like most of the other things within society, it's a business. So most folks don't necessarily think about it that way, but it's a business just like anything else. And the point of a business is to actually function and to make money. Now, most folks may not normally think like, my teachers, they're there to actually teach me, but they have a job there. They have a purpose for what they actually do. And so that entire environment wasn't something that was always there. There was a point in time where this whole idea of even public education did not exist. And as it slowly started coming about, there were a lot of there's a lot of, I guess, stereotypes or ideas that maybe this isn't going to work because not everyone's the same. People can't essentially learn this type of environment. So that in and of itself was a real breakthrough. And the whole idea was you wanted to have this opportunity, this environment created so that you could pass learning lessons along, right? So usually families do this within their own groups, but when you do it within a school environment, you could do it culturally as far as how do you pass this information down to the next generation. And what it also actually allowed you to do is it allowed you to meet the future with the past. So you essentially put all the lessons learned and you instill that within the students, and then they'll kind of carry that torch forward and continuing sort of the next generation of everything that is actually supposed to happen. And so that's what school actually represented. So it was like a big deal to actually be able to go to school, especially when it was really a question of if kids can actually even get educated. Like, believe it or not, at one point in time, that was not something that was available to everyone. It was only available to the wealthy. So for us to actually have that is actually a pretty big deal, right? But it's been in place, that same system's been in place for a long time, and there haven't really been a lot of changes with it. And so the whole idea of school even coming about was during the Industrial Revolution. And the whole point of the Industrial Revolution was instead of having people, let's say, work on these long conveyor lines, let's actually start incorporating machines and put a process into place. And what they found is as they put the machines in place, you got better output as far as, let's say, more results. Or you also were able to get better quality items actually being shipped out with less errors, right? So there were a lot of advantages to the Industrial Revolution. And they thought that, hey, you know what? If we put, students and our children through that same type of system, that we can produce a better workforce as well. So slowly you started to have bits and pieces of that actually come about. And since it's a system can have a lot of value, but over time that system can become old and outdated. And what you may notice in school that maybe haven't necessarily thought about was that school is based on a system, and the system is based on a series of assumptions. Whether they were facts at one point in time doesn't really matter so much, but it's based on a system. And so when you have a system, it's based on a series of assumptions of, let's say, someone's ideas or a group's ideas of how the world actually works. And it's also based on the perspective of, let's say, where the world is at that point in time, and sort of just brings all those things together. So society almost kind of makes that decision of where do we want the future of education to actually go. And that decision, it can be a little bit tough because it works for some folks to do well with academics, and it doesn't work well for other folks that don't do well in academics. And as a result, students can actually get labeled. So believe it or not, the labels are actually something that really doesn't help as much as you would think it would help. Because if I labeled you smart or I labeled you dumb, that actually, both of them come with consequences. Most people don't really think about that, right? Because they always maybe applaud their kids for doing or being smart or being bright. And believe it or not, that label of being smart or bright actually makes you risk averse. You actually don't want to take as many risks because you don't want to lose that label. That's like that's a coveted label. It's like, hey, I love that label. I don't lose it, so I want to continue to be smart and people to see me as smart. So I'm going to take less risks so I don't look dumb. And then on the other side of the equation, you get the label of being dumb or not intelligent. And then all of a sudden, all the potential that you have in yourself, you're not even going to try because they're just like, well, if people are going to label me that, I'm not even going to try anyway because I'm just kind of going to stay where people already associate me with me. So I'm going to stay in that comfort zone where folks have already kind of shunned me to. And it stops you from kind of going that next level. So if you really look at the whole label piece, I mean, it doesn't really help you. If anything, it's really what comes from inside. So one thing I know I work with my kids on is I always applaud them for their effort because it's always what they're doing, what they're responsible for, and how they actually bring that out into the world. And I think that's more important than anything else. But unfortunately, schools don't use that process. They have a different process in place because their whole idea is they want to be able to select the students from that category and those groups of who's going to be the next student for advancement and who should we actually invest in. And that's a problem too because everyone's got potential, and unfortunately the school system doesn't identify it within that capacity or in the right way, in my opinion. So you're taught based on what society wants and not necessarily what's the best for the individual, which is tough. I'm not saying teachers' jobs are going to be easy, but the school as a system makes it tough if that's the only place you're getting your education from. And then last but not least, academic success is rooted in good grades and good schools. And I can tell you growing up that's what my parents instilled in me because they were teachers. So the whole idea is if you want to be successful in life, you need good grades and you need to get in great schools, right? And I actually was able to go that route, but what that actually did is that kept me in the same cycle that my parents were in. And parents really probably don't tell you this, but they want you to be in a better situation than they were. So their whole idea is, I need you to do better than me. I need you to do better than me. So if you do better at the same things that your parents did, that's great. But it's not necessarily going to allow you to break the cycle to do something even farther beyond that. And so that's where the education component and honestly your teachers and what you're actually learning is super important. And the biggest thing I will say, I want to definitely give a shout out to all the teachers that go above and beyond to work with their students. That, like you make schools powerful and successful for what they're supposed to do. And I applaud all the teachers that are out there that do it for that. So not to take anything away from that, but the environment's changing. And so the biggest thing is like, how has school actually changed? Well, having a grandmother who's actually been able to tell me about her school experience, she told me that when she went to school, that she was actually in a small classroom, right? I know we have much bigger classrooms today, but she was in a small classroom. And there were a lot of other kids within her class. Like it wasn't just, the same age group. It wasn't just, let's say 8-year-olds. I mean, you had the entire spectrum in there. And so with that, you had practical lessons as far as, what the kids were actually taught was something that you could actually physically use. It wasn't something that, okay, maybe from 10 years from now, you might use this depending on your discipline. It's like, you can use this today. And the skill sets were a lot more appropriate for the time. And so the environment was fundamentally different. But since then, the environment's changed a lot. So the real question is, well, how has the environment changed and has it changed enough? And if you looked at what school was like before the lockdown, that classes sizes got very, very large. The teachers, again, depending on where you are, you want to be in a good school system because maybe the teachers take more pride in what they do. But that's not even a guarantee of anything. It's just, let's say, the standard. So there's a lot of things to think about, right? And the whole idea is you were looking to outsource or to have the education of your kids, provided by the schools. But all that's changing now. All that's changing. And so, again, if you thought about it before, what actually happened when kids went to school? Well, parents actually went to work, right? So you kind of had the separation of, kids are going to get their education in school, parents can go to work and do what they do. You kind of meet each other on nights and weekends, and that kind of slowly disappeared with the lockdown, right? Or quickly disappeared. And, you had the opportunity to go out and socialize, but everything that school actually represented was a system. So you're going to get the same results. It's going to be the same cycle. So what do you do to actually change that, right? We actually have that opportunity right now. And what it will represent is a a new system, a different system that actually parents are going to end up creating. Why? Because the school's not going to be taking on the load that it was before. I mean, it could try, in regards to, school, kids going to school maybe 1 or 2 days during the week, and then, work being sent home, but it's not the same environment. So with that environment change, you have to think, where do you actually want to be? Where do you want your kids to be? And now you have a hand in defining what that actually going to be. And that's a very powerful thing. It's almost like, with Spider-Man, right? Where, to whom much power is given, much responsibility is entrusted. Well, you have the responsibility now of making sure that your kids are actually in an environment where they're able to absorb and get as much as they possibly can from it. And your goal is not for them to repeat the cycle, right? So you have to offer them something new and something different. And that whole school environment piece, it's changing. But that's a good thing. Don't look at it as like, oh man, I got to figure out what I'm going to do with my kids for the next 3 days. And kids don't look at it like, oh, I got the next 3 days to do whatever I want because I'm not in school. You have to use it as an opportunity. And to have that freedom, that's something that's powerful. The ability to choose what it is you actually want to learn. The ability to implement things that you feel are going to be useful and practical in your day-to-day life. Like, that's an opportunity. That's a huge opportunity. It's not one that we commonly or often get. And so as a result, you now have the choice. You now have the opportunity to determine if you're going to continue with that same cycle that school is actually creating, or if you're going to break it. And I don't know about you, but man, when you break something, when you break a cycle and you all of a sudden start doing something new, you start opening the possibilities for what you actually can create, for what you can envision, for what you can bring in this world, for whatever. And you're not going to get that opportunity, really again. I don't know what the future holds, but I know that if you don't take the time that you actually are getting right now to do something, only you can do, something that you were born in this world to actually do, you're going to miss the opportunity. And so the biggest thing is, with all the time that we receive, for the time that we're going to have with the world constantly changing the way it is, now's not the time to sit back. Now's the time to engage. Now's the time to contribute, because you're going to see one of the greatest transfer of wealth and ideas and whatever's coming in this next generation happening right now. And it feels much better to see that roller coaster that you designed being used versus literally just sitting and being, riding it, right? So I hope you took a little bit from this lesson about school, about what it was, about what it represents, and how it's going to change. And I hope you also take the forefront in making that decision for yourself, for your kids, for your family, because you're going to make bigger difference than you can even imagine. And for any of the teachers out there as well, you're redefining the school experience. So I hope you put your best foot out there. I hope you just, teach whatever it is that you feel passionate about. So I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and I hope to catch you on the next one. Bye.